Welcome to the Progressing Recruiters Lives Everywhere podcast, brought to you by Amoria Bond. In each episode, we'll be exploring what life is like for those who work in recruitment, from the first few weeks of training to the life-changing success stories that can be achieved, all from the people who work in this industry every day. Within recruitment, there are no limits to how far you can progress, and we want to show you how and why choosing to work in recruitment could be the best decision for your life and your career. I'm Helen Cassin, Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant for the Amoria Bond Group. And in this episode, I'm talking to Jenny Walsh, our Senior Talent Acquisition Manager. Today, we're talking about what you need to know before you interview for a recruitment consultant job. So, Jenny, how would you explain what is involved in the process, as in for interviewing, like how many stages, any tasks and things like that we expect candidates to do?
Yeah, well, after a chat with the talent acquisition team initially over the phone, you will then meet with a senior consultant or manager within the business. That's generally either over face-to-face or over Zoom. We're really flexible. I guess the way we do it now is very different to how we might have a couple of years ago because of the impact of COVID. So typically, if you can get in for face-to-face, that's great. If not, we're more than happy to have that chat over Zoom. And that'll be a general chat about your background, and the consultant or manager will tell you more about what it's like to work at Amoria Bond. They'll give you a really honest reflection, the highs, the lows, exactly, what to expect and what the culture's like. After that, if you're successful, you'll then go on to have a final interview. So this will be in the office. It'll be a panel interview. So that'll include maybe 2 to 3 people, maybe one of the sales directors or senior managers, and you'll be asked to prepare a short presentation as well. So it's a 5 to 10 minute presentation, and you're given the full brief on what it needs to include. And it's things like more about you, your goals, your motivations, and how you align with our values. And I think that can sometimes sound a little bit scary because it's like panel interview, final presentation. But, I think it's important to stress, and this really well, everyone's very relaxed. It's a really relaxed type environment, really informal. So it's nothing to, be nervous about.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So what are you looking for when you talk to someone in an interview? Like what kind of skills and stuff you look for?
I think that there's so many, it's hard to kind of pinpoint down, but the desire to succeed and that coming across really well. So getting that real understanding of why somebody actually wants to work in recruitment, because as we all know, it's a challenging job. Even though it's challenging, it's obviously very rewarding, but it's that desire to want to do well, to want to succeed, to want to progress, that really needs to come out when we're having a chat and when we're doing an interview. And in line with that, we want to know more about your motivations and your goals. So the reasons as to why you're doing it, because that's going to be really important from a point of view where you're going to be successful and you're going to succeed, but also how we can help you get the desired results out of your career as well. I think some other things that we generally look for is evidence of hard work and resilience. I think, again, 2 really important factors. Like I just said, it can be a really challenging job. So we want people who are prepared and know what to expect and what it takes to be successful. And then I think most importantly over everything is someone who shares the same values as us. So we've, really worked hard over the last 16 years on our prioritizing our culture and our values above everything else. So it's really important that when we meet people who could potentially join our business, that it's a really good cultural fit and a really good fit from a values perspective. And I'd say that's probably even more relevant than, sales experience or education.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. So how long would you say a good interview would last?
I think you might disagree, but I think typically, a good first stage interview will probably last about 45 minutes to an hour. And then a good final interview, usually around like the 90-minute mark.
Yeah, no, I agree. Perfect. What advice would you give to someone who, say you've got a candidate who's super nervous, like before their interview? What advice, what tips, what would you do? Like, how would you help them?
Yeah, I think the best advice specifically for interviewing with Amoria Bond is to remember why you're there. So I'll explain that a little bit more. You've got to remember that we're hiring. We've got really ambitious growth targets. We want you to be successful. And that's really genuine. You know, when you go into that first stage or that final stage interview, we're rooting for you. We want you to do well, because in order for us to hit our growth targets, we need people to be successful. So we always set this up at the beginning of the interview to encourage people to relax and be themselves. The questions aren't there to trip you up. They're there so we can get to know the real you. So I think that's really important to remember. I know it's not a classical kind of breathing exercise or, piece of advice like that, but I think, remember that we want you to be successful. We're there to get to know you. Don't want to trip you up or ask really, really difficult or challenging questions. We just want to get to know that person and how they could be successful.
Yeah, amazing. So can you give any examples of any like really amazing candidates that have really impressed you in the interview stage? Like what stood out to you?
Yeah, I think I've not necessarily got a specific example of a person, but I think the things that always stand out in this interview process is during the presentation that you've been briefed on, that I mentioned earlier, make that personal. Those always tend to stand out. So, using pictures or personal examples of attributes you think that you have to be successful in the role, or examples of how you align with our values, our company values. So making something really personal really sticks with you and makes you remember that person. And another thing, research that the people who are interviewing you. It's always great to see people who've done their research in terms of, who's in the interview with them. They've done the research on the company and the background. And finally, I think people who prepare really great questions to ask at the end of the interview. And not just, I guess, your typical stock questions, but questions that are really, really important to you. So rather than saying, no, you've covered everything, I think it's really important to show that inquisitive side and ask really great questions at the end of the interview or throughout the interview.
Yeah, amazing. And I suppose on the flip side, any don'ts for interviews, like what you shouldn't do?
I won't give specific examples on this one either. No, I think there is one example that springs to mind. We had someone quite a while ago, and there's a question in the interview. What's the question? How would your friends describe you? That's it. And I think we had an example once of someone who said lazy.
Oh wow!
So that seems like maybe a little bit of an obvious tip to avoid. But I think probably the biggest mistake that we see every so often is, I guess, misreading the brief for the presentation. So the brief for the presentation is only meant to be like a 5-10 minute presentation, and the last thing you want to do is completely misjudge that and come in and do like a 50-minute presentation. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing to just be aware of.
Okay, amazing. So finally, do you have any final advice to give to someone who is preparing for an interview or considering applying for a job in recruitment?
Yeah, I think overall, do your research. So I'm not talking about the sectors that the business recruits into, the financials and all that. I'm talking about the research of the company culture and the values. So, do things like check out their social media pages, check out who works there, because it's a two-way street. It's not just whether you're right for the business, it's whether the business is right for you as well. And recruitment is a career. It's a long-term career. It's not just a job. So it's really, really important to know exactly what you want from a business and understand what your motivations are for getting into a role in a career like this. And I think that's the best piece of advice I can give before going to an interview is research that side of things, and also make sure it's what you want and you're really clear on that.
Yeah, perfect. Amazing. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found that helpful. And of course, if you are interested in looking into a career in recruitment, we'd love to have a chat with you. So please do get in touch with any of our TA team. Also, you can find out more details of our vacancies at amoriabond.com.